everyone, and thank you for tuning into LearnCast. My name is Brooke, and today we will be discussing types of inflation, disinflation, and deflation. To start off, we will be talking about money and inflation. In the short run, an increase in nominal monetary supply increases the real GDP, as an increase in monetary supply stimulates spending and lower interest rates. But in the long run, sticky prices rise and GDP returns to where it started. In the long run, change in nominal money supply, represented as M, leads to change in aggregate price level, represented as P, leaving the real quantity of money, M over P, at the same level as the start. This is the classical model of money and inflation, a simplified model of this phenomenon, where M over P is always at the long-run equilibrium, and the effect of a change in money supply on aggregate price level occurs instantly. In the aggregate supply, aggregate demand model, this can be shown as a vertical shift up of the short-run aggregate supply curve along the long-run aggregate supply curve, skipping the step of moving the short-run aggregate supply curve right, then left. This causes real GDP to stay the same and price level to increase. Now on to inflation tax. Fiat money is a type of money currently in circulation in the United States. It derives its value from the government. This means that the government can print money when they feel that they need to because the Federal Reserve and Treasury work together. The right to print money is a source of revenue for the government, and this revenue created because of this right is called seigniorage. When the government runs a large deficit and cannot raise taxes, cut spending, or borrow money, they print more money to cover the deficit. This imposes an inflation tax on the public, or a reduction in the value of money held by the public, as well as increases inflation. How does hyperinflation happen? First off, inflation causes consumers to try not to hold on to money so as to lessen the burden of this inflation tax. So consumers spend money quickly or acquire interest-bearing assets. The problem occurs when the prices rise due to inflation, so the government must print even more money to pay for expenses, furthering inflation even more, and so on. It becomes a cycle leading to large amounts of inflation in a relatively short amount of time. And now let's focus on moderate inflation and deflation. In the aggregate supply, aggregate demand model, inflation caused by a significant increase in the price of an input with an economy-wide importance is cost-push inflation. In the aggregate supply, aggregate demand model, inflation that is caused by an increase in aggregate demand or a rightward shift of the aggregate demand curve, where demand is too high for supply, so prices rise, is demand pull inflation. Expansionary government policies lead to higher inflation, while contractionary policies lead to lower inflation. This is difficult to pull off politically because contractionary policies lead to lower inflation but also higher unemployment, while expansionary policies have good short-term effects, but they ultimately lead to inflation. Now let's talk about the output gap and unemployment rate. Potential output is the level of real GDP that the economy produces once all prices are fully adjusted. The difference between real GDP and potential output is called the output gap. When actual aggregate output is equal to potential output, the actual unemployment rate is equal to the natural rate of unemployment. When the output gap is positive, in an inflation gap, the unemployment rate is below the natural rate. And when the output gap is negative, in a recessionary gap, the unemployment rate is above the natural rate of unemployment. Fluctuations of aggregate output along the long-run trend of potential output corresponds to fluctuations of the unemployment rate around the natural rate. Overall, inflation, deflation, and disinflation are closely connected to and affect many parts of the economy. Thank you for joining me for a review of types of inflation, deflation, and disinflation. Be sure to follow us on Spotify, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check our website to stay up to date with the latest releases. Until next time, listen, learn, repeat.